Good evening, everybody. My name is Charles Chaffay, and it's my pleasure to talk with Elias, David, and Gavin about this wonderful film that no one before had seen in the theater. So you're a lucky audience to have been able to experience this together with all of us. Because we only have a half an hour, I'm going to speak very little. But the one thing that I thought I would start the conversation with, which is I've written a lot about opera and film, and opera films in particular, and one of the things I harp about a lot is the idea that most films that you watch that call themselves opera films have no consideration whatsoever about being films at all. And that's definitely not the case with this film, and nor the Kentridge actually. But I thought it was potentially a good way to start the conversation of, if Elias, you might want to talk about the origins of this work and its relationship to what you consider an opera film to be, and both of you as well, this kind of strange genre which is being celebrated here this week, which is a very unique festival unto itself. What do you, all three of you, think about what that opera film genre means in relation to the film and in general?
Well, all right, I'm just going to say briefly that this, exists as a piece of cinema, but something that a group of us have talked about quite a bit is translating this onto the stage in a way where we create, using many different mediums, an immersive environment that completely absorbs the audience in a way that we haven't seen before. A lot of our conception about opera is locked into 19th century staging of opera, and for us, we've talked about this. Opera began as part of an ancient rite. It goes back to the earliest history of human beings. The idea that in order to express the divine, in order to express the sacred, that you can't use words, you can't even use a known language. You have to sing from your heart. You have to wail. You have to lament, and that takes a different part of the brain. Everything is moving in such a linear way. Like you look at Netflix, you look at movies that are being put out, they appeal to a very literary part of our brains, and they're closer to literature than they are the visual arts. And cinema began as a visual art, as a silent visual art. And something that David Wexler and I talked early on about is the idea of what it must have been like for the first human beings to enter into the Sistine Chapel, while the paint was drying 600 plus years ago, and to look horizontally and then realize they need to look up with their jaws dropping in complete awe. And so the conversation between David and myself was, how do we bring the sacred back into the image? How do we create an initiatory opening of consciousness through image and through music and through the apotheosis of the human voice?
Also, initially, we set out to create an upbeat romantic comedy, and something went horribly wrong at some point, and
I got involved.
Elias got involved. I think it's really fascinating because in producing this film together with our entire crew, I wasn't exactly thinking about it as an opera. I know that you had that in mind, from very early on, but I saw it as something kind of just unique. I know it has roots in that form, but to me it felt like very much an experiment in sound and image, and something that was, tackling certain philosophical, nonlinear kinds of themes that definitely had to be sung, as you said. it's something that's not about telling you a story. It's about kind of an experience that is very cyclical, loops back on itself, and is very kind of teleological. It doesn't have a goal exactly. It's just more about being within a space. And so, yeah, I think that it's interesting how it does have these elements of opera, but it's also, at least for me, something kind of unique in terms of a cinematic experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. And following Sybil, oh my God, that was just such a marvelous pairing, I thought, because even though there's lots of text involved in Sybil, we get a sense of life's journey and something outside of ourselves. With what we were trying to approach, and in my own experience with operatic cinema, I know it takes the form of, from on one end of the spectrum, filming a staged piece, to in between. I've seen one piece that moved me extremely was Munich opera production in the 70s of Alban Berg's Waltzek, which was almost pure cinema, but still retained some elements of the staging. And then I would say that this extreme of the spectrum, we ventured into an exploration of, I believe one of our early ponderings involved thinking about what music would sound like 3,000 years in the future, or what if you imagined an alien being that had conscious control over every hair follicle on its head, or some massive intelligence. And those kinds of prompts led us into this ritualistic and very abstract storytelling.
Actually, you mentioned Wozzeck, and Kentridge directed a production of Wozzeck in Europe and in New York. And while that was playing, it dawned on me, in many ways, another similarity between Elias, your work, and Kentridge's is that Kentridge is, in many ways, an artist from the 1910s, shot through shot through history with a South African sensibility, but he's really kind of a Tristan Tzara and Meyerholtz combination. You're very much somebody who's interested in early cinematic history, and you mentioned silent film, and you had thought about whether or not you wanted to prompt the audience ahead of time with the fact that there's no subtitles here and no intertitles, which you had removed from an earlier iteration of this. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about the fact that there's a big mythology behind this work, which we can't go into in this short amount of time, but that's not necessary for the audience to have any idea that there's some extremely complex and deep underpinnings to this, but that from a textual perspective and a content perspective, no one needs to know that.
No, exactly. I had this experience a number of years ago with, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a Greek and Latin scholar, and I was talking about what it must have been like to hear, Homer's Iliad, spoken around a fire, and what that experience would have been like. And he gave me a treat where he had one of his star students actually recite the first, few pages of the Iliad in Attic Greek, from the 6th century BC with the pronunciation. And there was a musicality to it, and a kind of like nobility to the sounds that were emanating through the words. And I clearly understood that how all of that text to the Iliad could have been memorized because of the metering and the cadence of the voice, that helped prompt the memory of such a vast amount of text. So the fact of the matter is that I don't speak Attic Greek, but at the same time I was able to feel and understand on a very deep level, what was being emoted to me. So with the text to this, the the libretto is basically the story of, the divine unity of things, at the very, very beginning, as if the Webb telescope was able to find that first moment when the Godhead, the unity of all things in complete silence and repose, suddenly, cataclysmically, ripped itself apart and became this dual-natured thing that was then sort of struck with the dilemma of, I am one, but now I am many, and how do I reassemble and reconnect myself all over again? And that lament is woven through the tapestry of the text of the libretto. But what's important for this film and what we were working towards is that, and with the singers, the two singers, the sopranos, who are magnificent, Michaela, and Michaela Tobin and Sharon. When I talked them through the libretto, I told them that it was more important that when they sang, that they felt the words and were not so, caught up with trying to please Gavin and myself with enunciating, the perfection of the actual word for people to, understand on a literary level. So the film is operating on a multivalent level, and again, it is an experiment that we were sort of problem solving certain elements in order to translate this to a massive stage on a much more ambitious level, but using many different elements of the projected image, the still image, but also live performance and live orchestra, live orchestrations of music, and all of that. So, as much as we love presenting the film, we are also here to, win hearts and minds, to get us towards that to find a home where we'd be able to get this into a live production.